Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Bobble Pod. On this episode, we're going to be talking about marketing attribution in terms of econometrics, if I can get the word out.
It's not easy to say.
It's not easy to say. And we have a special guest with us today, Andrew Jacobs. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you.
Before we begin, as always, everybody already knows by now. You're probably sick and tired of me saying it. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, hello YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell notification so you get the episodes every Tuesday to watch. So today we're talking about marketing attribution with Andrew Jacobs from RAM Tracking. So Andrew, welcome to Bobble Pod.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on. I'm really excited to talk about this topic, attribution. It's not really talked about a lot in the industry, and it's a complex discussion point. But before we get straight into it, for our listeners, for our viewers on YouTube, please give us a bit of a background about yourself.
Sure. I fell into marketing and digital marketing sort of around 2010. I'd run my own business for about 12 years. Had a family, and the way that I used to have my free time without children meant that running a business didn't kind of work anymore. So I looked for a different career path. Just randomly, Google happened to be hiring, and liked the fact that I'd run business because obviously you're speaking directly to businesses. So they hired me to basically teach businesses how to do Google Ads, PPC. And that's how I learned from the best in terms of it's their system. Over the next sort of 4 years working through various different departments, ended up working for the department that looks after the agencies, and then realized that I was offering all of this advice but not really interacting with businesses. So I decided I wanted to go and work for an agency so that I could have the direct interaction and actually get more involved. And that's really what it's about, is understanding businesses and understanding what you've got to do makes it a lot easier to try and find the right phrases and do the right sort of marketing for that purpose. So I then spent the next 4 years working for an agency and then decided I wanted to kind of get even more involved and actually work for a business where I could then expand upon the wider marketing remit and not just the PPC bubble, which is still my favorite and my baby, but you know. So I then went to work for a mattress company, did that for 3 or 4 years. And then I've ended up working for B2B because I fancied a change of pace. So I came out of e-commerce and now working for RAM Tracking for just had my first year anniversary.
Congratulations on the anniversary.
Really enjoying that kind of cut and thrust of a completely different sector. And that's where I am at the moment.
Such a wealth of experience. I think if you've had that experience directly in Google, like I was lucky to have, when during my time, previous agencies going directly down to Google, doing training sessions with them, you get a different viewpoint of the platform than what you see from somebody else at agency or business level teaching you. You get to see it from Google's point of view. Although it's not as good as it is now, it used to be better back then. I think the support I used to get from Google.
100%.
I think
now. COVID killed it for a lot of businesses. They moved a lot of different directions, and I don't think the support is, I just don't think it's physically possible to have all of that support at the right level, because they have to cut people off at a certain spend level, and a lot of people that dip their toe into it, it's still easy to get wrong. They're trying to automate a lot of the systems, which for traditional PPCers, they see that as a negative slant. And I half agree and half don't agree. Yeah. It depends on the automation processes, because what Google's very good at is picking up signals and interpreting those signals far better than any human being can do. But its interpretation of what it thinks is right doesn't always compute either. And it's got its own agenda, because Google, at the end of the day, it only really cares about people continuing to use it as a search engine. And that's where it's always going to have its priorities. So click-through rate. Not as bothered about conversion. It will always point to that click-through rate and hold. And it's important to obviously have a good click-through rate and be relevant, but don't hold your hat on that. Businesses want conversions, and I'd rather take a sacrifice of a weaker click-through rate for a better conversion rate. But that's not how Google behaves.
I literally just said this on the previous podcast about AI in digital marketing, talking about, how Google works, its automation, its optimization score, its auto recommendations. Half of them are good, half of them are not good, because it doesn't understand the end user at a human level. And no matter how good as a AI machine or tool can be, it doesn't understand your aims and objectives. Because you're working towards their campaign aims and objectives. It doesn't understand what your budget level are. It doesn't understand if you're in a specific niche. So it just that's the bit it will never have, and that's why always a human interaction is going to be important.
100%. Let Google do what it's good at. I raising the bid at 3:33 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon because it knows historically that that's better than Wednesday morning at 10, which you're not going to know.
Yeah,
and then oversee it and make sure that it's not making silly mistakes and
adding in the wrong keywords to bid on and make sure it's the right keywords. Yeah.
Broad is to be taken with a very cautious approach.
Yes.
And lots of negative keywords to do your research first before you even spend a click.
So attribution,
yes.
which we've just touched upon that about Google, from click-through rate to conversion rates and how we would sacrifice click-through rate for better conversion rate. Because ultimately, when you're working client side, and we call it client side, it's all about return on investment, return on ad spend, but how you measure that at different spots within the funnel. You've got some channels that are top of the funnel that contribute. There's other channels bottom of the funnel that actually drive the hardcore conversions, but then you've got to attribute that evenly to each channel. What purpose or what support level does each channel have across that multi-touch point conversion funnel? So when we talk about attribution, we're talking about a model, which is a set of rules that determines how to credit a sale or conversion assigned to those touch points in a conversion path. Do you agree with that?
Correct.
Yeah.
And there are many to choose from. A very famous retailer back in the late 19th century, a guy called Wanamaker, and this is still true to today, came up with a very famous quote. He goes, "Half of my marketing is working really well for me. The problem is I don't know which half." And it's still true to this day. What attribution helps to do when you are using more than just one channel of source, if you're just using one channel, then it's kind of a lot easier and a lot simpler. But in this day and age, there is a lot of marketing options to choose from. And some things naturally start the ball rolling. And people find a billboard, a television ad, something that introduces them to your business, depending on what you're doing, of course. And then as they get further down their intent, they'll go on to Google and they'll do some searching. They might start with, for example, with RAM tracking, vehicle tracking as a keyword. And then they'll go vehicle tracking for vans, or they go to a more extended length because they've done a little bit of research and they kind of know what they want. And understanding that, obviously, Google does very well in its own world, in its own bubble, which is why it has attributed modeling within its own choice of conversion. The problem is it only models itself on any click point within Google, not anywhere else. And what you've got to understand is you need to know what starts your journey, what continues your journey, and what ends your journey. The sort of 5 main simplistic models all have an emphasis or a slant on a certain position. The obvious one, and the one that a lot of people start with, is what's called last touch.
Yeah.
And that basically means no matter how many interactions somebody has with your business, the last point of where it converts is where that gets the win. And you can see for obvious reasons why that's wrong. I'm going to use an analogy, if that's all right with you guys.
Go ahead.
I've got 3 children. One's called Izzy, one's called Riley, one's called Brody. One is 17, one is 15, one is 12. And they've all got 3 jobs to do every week in order to get their pocket money. Right? One job is half an hour, one job is 20 minutes, one job is 10 minutes. They get charged, or they get paid £3, £2 and £1 for each job that they do. So in picturing the scene, they've all done their jobs, and Izzy decides to do the washing on the Saturday, which is the day that she gets, everybody gets their pocket money. Now, if we were to do last touch modeling, she gets all the pocket money and the other 2 get nothing. And now, is that fair? No, it's not. In the same way that if the same scenario happens and Riley makes his bed on the Monday, which is his first job, and everybody else does their jobs in the week, and at the end of the week, he gets all the pocket money and nobody else gets the pocket money, that's first touch modeling, and you can see how that's wrong as well. That's unfair. And we do the same again for linear. You could argue, well, that's slightly fairer in that everybody did all of their jobs. So they all get paid evenly, £6, £6, But what actually happened is Izzy did all of the 30-minute jobs, Riley did all the 20-minute jobs, and Brody did all the 10-minute jobs. So in theory, they should get paid differently and not the same, which is what linear modeling is all about. And it's the same with all of the others. Time decay. The later on in the week that they'll have done the jobs, they'll have got paid more than if they'd done their jobs at the start of the week. So you can understand now why, hang on, if that's unfair in terms of paying out pocket money, it's exactly the same in terms of all the marketing modeling that you do, which is why all of these simplistic models, whether you choose first, last, linear, time decay, are all going to favor whatever's in that position. So if Facebook is your introductory and you've got first touch modeling, guess what's going to win? It's going to be Facebook. And if Google's your last touch, which is often brand term, well, guess what? The brand term gets all the credit. But in the same vein, how can you credit a brand term for all the success if somebody has to discover your brand in order to then click on your brand in the first place? So that's why simplistic modeling is always flawed. Whatever you choose, it will always favor what's in that position, which means you end up spending more money potentially in that particular marketing mix, when actually in reality, it's a piece of a bigger part of puzzle that needs to be solved.
I see so many companies still using the simplistic models. I know that you guys as RAM, I don't, but we come into it and people say, well, Facebook isn't working. Where's your evidence? Or all our conversions come from Google. But what they don't realize is exactly what you just said then. What they're looking at when they look at what should be GA4 or Google Analytics previously is that the last conversion is being attributed on a last click model. Now, Google Analytics works on a last click, essentially, last touch point model, essentially. And if you don't set the conversion actions within platforms like Google Ads to a different touch point, so you move it in terms of you move it from first or last clicks to multi-touch, then you're not going to see a real benefit. And now that's when you see within a Google ad platform, you might see the conversion number not just be 7, but it'll be 7.4.
Exactly.
Now, that means that the 0.4% of one of the conversions is attributable to Google because it's fallen part of some of the cycle to other potential platforms. So that's how you should do it. And you should split it out as a percentage. And that's why I talk about the funnel. Every time we do a strategy and we present channels to a client, I tell them, where does this sit ideally in your funnel, from touch points to the website, then touch points to the actual conversion, whether that's a lead or sale. Doesn't really matter. It's the same process. Now, the platforms like, YouTube, social media, anything outdoor, for example, is, top of the funnel, touch points. You're visually seeing it. You're expecting recall or some form of at least a click if it's digital for them to get onto the website. Now, that's not going to support later when you do retargeting tools on display on Google, or retargeting later on in other platforms to get those people down. And then you've got on-page SEO, which, if they have a bad experience with the website, you need to know that organically they're coming back and having a great experience with the website and then convert. So you can't just do it as linear first or last touch. It has to be proportionate to, right, we spend X on Facebook, we spend X on Google, X. If you were to just as a test to remove a platform you think wasn't working, I guarantee you'll see a drop off in performance and conversions because it's going to impact channels like Google. So if Google is your final touch point that's going to get the conversion through, then remember, you're passing the baton on. It's a relay. It's a 400, 100 meter by 4 relay. You've got to pass the baton on. Different channels will pass on that conversion process and user journey from one to the other until you get to the finish line. It's as simple as that.
Well, this is where the complex modeling comes into play. There's a number of different models, and one's called Shapley. There's another one called Markov chains. There's another one called Fantastic Forest. There's a number of different ones that work at top down and bottom. Without getting too complex, what they're doing, and if I bring back the analogy of my kids again, is they're working out whether a particular channel has had an influence and where it has the influence at the right time. So, for example, if Izzy has reminded my youngest to make his bed or do his washing because it's his turn, she's influenced him in completing that job, and therefore arguably should get a little bit more credit than just her own influence of what she's done in her channel, because she's influenced him to do that job, which may or may not have happened as well. And this is what the complex models are doing. They're looking at not just the journeys where conversion is completed, but they're looking at all the journeys where it hasn't completed and gone, right, 8 touch points. I'm going to take out touch point 2. Is it more or less likely to have converted with or without that? And then it's starting to understand, actually, you didn't need that campaign at mid-funnel on your Facebook campaign because it's really not having any impact. Yes, you might be getting impressions, and yes, it might be getting visibility, and you've been paying probably £20 CPM at these days for Facebook. But the point is that it's not having its impact. And without having an actual piece of software to help you understand this, you do have to experiment with things, but make sure you do it. And again, there's not just the simplicity of different time of year, different kind of aspects, but if we try and keep it simple, if you do put something in silo and just stop it and just leave it, or try it in a region, like with television, if you just say, right, I'm going to switch off Google ads just in London, but I'm going to keep it everywhere else, and see what happens over that month in terms of the impact of whether the sales have stayed static, whether they've gone up or down, can give you an indicator. So you have to run experiments, not too many experiments, because you don't know if then one impacts the other. So if you're running, landing page optimization, stop. Don't do that, because it might be that's causing the change rather than anything else. But it just means it's much slower to get to a result, because you're having to just do things one at a time, whereas these softwares are running so many different touch points and understanding things at speed that a human being can't process, that it's kind of learnings need to then come into play.
Is there any kind of like software that RAM uses specifically? You talked about different models and softwares.
Luckily for me, moving into a lead generation is a lot simpler process, because a lot of them are generally one touch. The size of businesses that we try and acquire, their process of doing research is obviously, can be a number of touch points, but generally speaking, it's the time to get to a lead often can be just one channel doing its job. So I'm lucky in that respect that a much more significant purchase like a sofa or a car or something like that, where people do spend holidays 3 to 6 weeks deciding what they want to do before they make that purchase, it makes it more difficult. But we do run a number of different pieces of analysis that I kind of look into and then decide what we want to assign a credit to if something in the past has been influenced. And again, that time decay does come into play. It is important, because the longer something has been where the touch point has been, the less significant you can claim it to be. Because whilst human beings are very good at remembering things, even subconsciously, which is why billboards work and that in general, we do subconsciously pick up all of these things in day to day, even though we're not actually looking at them. But something that somebody got 3 years ago and there's been nothing in between, you can't really claim that as a win. So it's about finding and understanding how long somebody spends in that interest cycle. Holidays, tends to be 12 weeks. And significant purchases a similar amount of time. If you're buying a T-shirt, you're not going to be what are you doing with your life if you spend
Amazon makes it so easy now for you to buy a T-shirt. You just do it with one touch.
But that's it. You've got to look at what your journey is and then understand within that time frame what you want to deem as a value add in that respect.
Also, I was going to say, it's not just one model that you might use. You might use some of the more simplistic models for certain elements of your business. For example, we'll use time decay as part of our exhibitions. So we do marketing showcase exhibitions, because if that client eventually converts, and we have clients converting this year where we touched with them and met them at the exhibition last year, and we've already been back to that same event this year. So that's the time decay element. So a proportion of that client coming on board will be a portion to our budget that goes into exhibitions and marketing showcase. However, the reason why that's taken that long is bigger companies interest cycle, as you just mentioned, the time it takes them to consider. They might not be ready, but they have a plan. Bigger companies, multi-billion-pound companies will plan 6 to 12 months in advance with budgets, etc., to try and get it down. So you got to think about who it is that's come through, the level of interest, the time interest, but also we've been nurturing that internally through emails, through touch points, by making sure, well, we haven't heard from them in 2-3 months. Well, actually, let's reach out again with a personalized email once they're in the funnel. But we can't then disparate that. We can't just say, well, it came because of the showcase. Well, it came because we continued with our, funnel process in terms of
the big
making
question
multiple
you've got
touch
to
points.
ask, of course, is if you hadn't have been at the show the second year, would that business have come on board? And that's the key is in understanding that.
Yeah, because there's an element when it's specifically physical is, like anything with outdoor. I always say out of home media is a lot more harder to apply to an attribution model unless you've got a specific call to action, like go to this page or scan this QR code or use this specific code and discount, etc.
Well, this is where deterministic and probabilistic comes into play. And there are things like tap ad and lots of different other things that use a percentage chance of that was and stitch things together, which is what that MTA is all about. And then there's always the stuff that actually we know for a fact has happened, that somebody's clicked on that ad at that point, and therefore you can definitely attribute that. So humans can't do that. And this is why getting something sophisticated, which unfortunately does have a price tag to it, is the best option in terms of looking at true MTA. We
just recommended one to an app company we work with in Dubai, Apps Flyer, because you can use the GA as much as you want and the platform which the app's created in, and you can rely on Google and Apple search ads as elements. But like Apps Flyer is going to give you more detail in terms of understanding different touch points, what's contributing towards app downloads, but also if it came from, or percentage of that app download came from a certain channel, what is the uninstall rate and what is the conversion rate? So you can see the potential cost per install, real value, but the cost per conversion in terms of from a sales point of view. But everything we're talking about, and I just want to get your viewpoint, is like RAM tracking, global company, we'll have, not a simple but more complex model in place. Quite a lot of our listeners are sometimes sole traders, SMEs, micro businesses. Now, they might not even have a marketing team in some cases as well. What advice would you give to them in terms of when it comes to attribution modeling, in terms of should they focus them more on simpler models? If so, which? Or should they look at something a bit more detailed?
Yeah, I think as a hard and fast rule, like I said, all of the simplistic models have shortcomings. But if I was to pin my hat on something that I would say is the best of those models, I would say time decay, because ultimately the influence of something that's been nearer than further away should be given slightly more of an advantage. Not that you should ever dismiss the stuff that's happened in the first place, because ultimately somebody has to be introduced by something. But the longer that is left, the less impact that has, because people will tend to forget things as well. So that constant email nurture, just if it's just seeing it at the top of the inbox every so often without being too aggressive, which is that can have its negative impact. Unsubscribe, lost it. I would say with things like that, where you've got a longer nurture path, give value, give something that you can say that then that company sees you as a go-to for advice. For example, with RAM tracking, there's a daily vehicle checks that a lot of businesses need to do in order to be roadworthy compliant. So we often will just send an email that says, here are the 10 checks you should be doing to make sure that every day that car is roadworthy. So God forbid something should happen, you've done your due diligence and you've got a report that says, well, actually the car was in working order when it went out that day. And just giving advice to companies like that and saying, look, we are the go-to at any kind of information. It's the same with the website. Build that out and put lots of blog information into your websites so that Google doesn't just see you as a commercial entity. You're actually offering proper sound advice to be an industry leader. That will help with your rankings as well. Is that that company will then trust you a lot more. And then when it does come to that ready to buy, well, I've been getting regular emails from RAM or whatever your business is. They know what they're talking about. I'm gonna at least go with them and kind of get a quote, etc.
Yeah, it's literally why we do the podcast, and it helps. So when you go to our showcase events, you'll see on our big banner is subscribe to Bobble Pod, and as part of our email nurture, we don't just sell. I focus on this: educate your USPs, educate how you help. How are you going to help overcome a problem? I always say this: people go to Google for answers. Make sure you have the answer. It's not a sell anymore. If they have a problem, give them solutions. So I gave an example of Olay used to do, if you typed in like dark skin or dark circles under eyes, it'd be like, this is the product, and it'd be product focused and price elements. Now, when you type in, let's say something like dark skin under eyes, Olay changed their strategy, even from a paid perspective, to say symptoms and causes of dark skin under eyes. And then that information would be on the product page as well as it. So they're giving you more of an informed decision. Like, this is what could be causing you to get dark circles under your eyes. Here's a product that helps support that. And here's what you need to do as part of a system. Checks, elements, get better sleep, elements like that.
Yeah.
Moisturize, wash your face in the morning, all those kind of things. That is the approach you've got to take, because when it is predominantly more B2B as opposed to, let's say, direct to consumer, you have to educate. So we didn't just in our emails be like, oh, how's it going? Are you ready yet? No, it was like, or here's a seminar that we're hosting, or here's the latest podcast that we talked about, or here's some updates that you might not be aware of from GA that we're just sharing out that you need to be aware of. And this is what you need to do. And this is how it might be impact you. So be ready, essentially. So it becomes more of a informative education nurture. So they're always getting value. Then we try to connect with them on LinkedIn, and then they see all our educational content on our social media. It just becomes more of a, better measurable format. But again, I come back to the element. Even if you are small or large, educate. Don't focus on the hard sell. You focus on the hard sell when you're at the table with them. Different for an e-commerce company, because obviously it is more about the harder sell sometimes when it comes to seasonality. But if it's B2B directly, do the hard sell when you're face to face with them and they're ready to buy. Don't do it leading up to getting them to that table, essentially.
Yeah, and in terms of generally your marketing mix, try and find a good experiment to test. And like I say, if you've then got at least a control and a variable. So rather than just switching it off completely, find an area that in the country, if you're nationwide or something along those lines, that you can signal out and go, right, we're only going to show Facebook to anybody north of Leeds and everybody south of Leeds doesn't. And then look at the difference from a 6-8 weeks time and sort of say, well, actually, we can see that there's a value to that particular ad running or particular middle of the funnel campaign.
But it lets you then redistribute budget effectively. So where to, that actually that we don't need to spend as much on this channel because its conversion rate is good. So, but in order to keep those conversions coming through, we need to support at these few touch points more, because that's what lets them know we exist, and we know the rest of our funnels are more automated and it works. So we can keep that budget there, but we can invest more here if we want to get more leads and more.
It might even just be a simple case of frequency capping. So I only need my customer to see my ad 5 times a month rather than 20 times a month, which is going to cost me a lot more. And find the sweet spot. And then if you go too far and you find, well, it seems to have had quite an impact, you can always nudge it back again. Just do things in their individual status without too much going on at the same time, because then you never really know what was that negative, positive impact if you're going to do things without the assistance of a sophisticated modeling system. And
as we begin to wrap up, what I'm going to say, my advice is to everyone is have patience, because everything we talked about doesn't happen in a couple of weeks' time. When you are testing different and taking one touch point out, you've got to wait for the data to come through and have enough data to understand what impact it had by taking it out, or did it have no impact at all. And then you've got to move on to the next and the next and the next, and you're going to have multiple channels. So just like you said, if you've got too much going on, you're not going to know what's working and what is working. You've got to break it down into measurable, digestible chunks. And that can take weeks, that can take months, that can even sometimes take years, depending on the size of your organization.
Absolutely. There's the simplistic way to look at it would be hour of day, you're going to get that in a few weeks. Day of the week, you're going to get that in a few months. Months of the year, that's going to take you years. And it's that kind of understanding. You get to what we call a point of significance, where you can say 95% or more that's definitely a pattern of intent or a pattern that's working negatively in order to make the change to improve that performance. And depending on how much traffic is coming to your site, you might find that a test takes days or it might take weeks. But as long as you understand that, and it's about where to move the dial, to make a difference. If something at the end of the day marginally changes things, is it worth doing it in the first instance? Try and work out, well, I'm spending the most here, so maybe I should probably start here and see, and then you're getting down to that, like the difference, on a Google ad between an exclamation mark or a full stop. When you're getting down to that micro, you're just like, what am I doing with my life?
Capitalizing words and stuff like that. Oh, okay. But literally that's where you will get to. But that just shows and you fine-tuned your attribution model, and you know what's working, you know what elements you have control over that you should be optimizing against, what you shouldn't.
And things change. Demographics change, or your business changes, and you've got a new product which doesn't necessarily equate to what you've done it before. You can't always throw the same book at it. You've got to treat it like a new venture.
One final question for you, Andrew, is what key piece of advice or information should the listener who's been listening in, watching on YouTube, take away from this podcast?
The first thing I would say is just make sure that what you are tracking is true. Have a source of truth. Whatever you choose to use, just make sure that it's accurate, because your data is only going to be as good as the tracking that you're doing. If it's wrong, then you're going to make that mistake as good as your data is. So that's the first step. Is if you need some help with that, find the relevant individual that's their expert in what they do, in order to get that set correctly. And like I say, then find where you have a testing plan and stick to it, and just make sure that when you make that decision, you've got grounded evidence to suggest that is a proper statistical point of evidence, not just. Everybody gets pressures from the top to get results, but don't be pressured into making a decision too soon, because you may end up actually having an adverse impact on your campaigns by coming to a conclusion too quickly.
Yeah, we had that with a client, and I think I mentioned it on a podcast a few weeks ago. Is they were adamant from something they'd read online that introducing target CPA to what we were doing in a specific campaign worked, and we were adamant it didn't. But then pressure came in, said colleague changed it, performance dropped off significantly, and that's why we say, look, listen to us, we're the experts. But my advice would be to someone is just have a bit of patience. Not every test is going to pull out the results you might want, and that's the whole point of doing the testing and understanding the different touch points. Yeah,
it might be a cul-de-sac that you have to back out of, but at least by understanding that, that you've still learned something from it, albeit don't ever do it again. But the point is that you still learned something. And yes, everybody wants CRO landing page variables to win against the control all the time.
Always.
And there are things you can do, like market research to kind of tweak it in its favor, because everybody wants to make advancements, but it's all right to have a test go not the way you'd expect it to, because you still learn that, and actually that's still valuable.
No, that's bang on. So I want to thank you, Andrew, for joining us. That's probably been the most detailed insights podcast we've probably done this year. So thank you.
Welcome.
And for you that are listening and watching, thank you for listening to this episode. Probably a longer episode than you probably expect, but don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and give us your feedback. Don't forget to add us at Bobble Digital, use the hashtags Mr. Bobble, Ask Bobble, and hashtag BobblePod. And we will catch you on the next episode. Thank you very much.